In other news, days after the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland travelled to Washington for urgent talks, today a group of American lawmakers is in Copenhagen. The bipartisan delegation is seeking to reassure Denmark of their congressional support, despite President Trump's increasingly direct threats that he intends to acquire Greenland, potentially by force.
We are showing bipartisan solidarity with the people of this country and with Greenland. They have been our friends and allies for decades. We want them to know we appreciate that very much. And the statements being made by the president do not reflect what the American people feel.
Just the suggestion that the U.S. would take Greenland by force does real damage, not just to the relationship with Greenland, with Denmark, but to America's own national security. And that rhetoric plays right into the hands of our greatest adversaries, Russia and China.
Well, that was two members of that American delegation to Denmark today. Listening to that with me was Kethevane Gorjestani, our foreign editor. So, Kethevane, let's talk about this delegation to Copenhagen, meetings today with Danish and with Greenlandic officials. What do you think the goal is?
Well, clearly, as we heard there, the ultimate goal is to reassure Denmark and Greenland that despite the threats coming out of the White House, there is support in the United States, specifically in the U.S. Congress. Now, this delegation has been billed as a bipartisan delegation. There are only two Republicans, but that is not representative of what you're starting to hear within the Republican ranks in Congress, even those who haven't made the trip, but who have been pretty critical of Donald Trump's threats to take over Greenland. And the movement to sort of rein in Donald Trump when it comes to Greenland is gaining some steam. There are two senators who are part of that delegation, Jeanne Shaheen, that we just heard, the Democrat, but also Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who's a Republican. They've introduced a bipartisan legislation that would try to rein in Donald Trump, prohibit him from using federal funds from the Department of Defense and Department of State in order to take over or annex Greenland or any other NATO member state. A similar bill proposed in the House as we speak, with support of at least one Republican. That could also be gaining ground. The other big goal is also to sort of counter Donald Trump's and the Trump administration's justification for a potential U.S. takeover of Greenland, which is that somehow the United States absolutely needs to control Greenland, to annex Greenland in order to protect its own national security interests in the Arctic. What some of the senators are saying and pushing forward and highlighting is the fact that there is already a U.S. military base in Greenland. It's been there for about 75 years. There's a treaty between the U.S., Greenland, and Denmark, and Greenland and Denmark are willing to have more U.S. troops on their soil. It's the U.S. that has removed those troops, and therefore they could surge that U.S. military presence and not necessarily need to annex by force or other this territory in order to complete those national security interests, if that is ultimately the goal.
All right, Kethevane, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. And look, staying with this story, Germany, France and the United Kingdom are among the European countries that are now sending a small number of troops to Greenland amid these threats by Donald Trump. And it is something that Copenhagen says it's grateful for.
We are so grateful for the support we're receiving from France, from Germany, from other reliable allies. It means everything to us because, of course, we are a small country with 6 million people, and we cannot stand up to the Americans ourselves. So it is important that others step up in a situation like this, where we are under so much pressure as we are right now. We must show that we mean it and that we cannot allow anyone to take our territory.
Well, still with me then, Kethevane Gorjestani. Kethevane, it's important to emphasise that when we're talking about European troops going to Greenland, this really is just a handful of soldiers, isn't it? And so it's not going to really impact very much Trump's goal of trying to take over Greenland somehow. So, look, how do you understand this new movement of European troops? Is this symbolic, or does this have a real tangible weight behind it?
Well, look, obviously, sending a few dozen troops is not going to be enough to prevent the U.S. military from taking over Greenland if they decide to take over Greenland by force. That said, just because it is in a way symbolic doesn't mean it's not sending some serious and important messages. The first one is showing support to Denmark and Greenland, and we heard the reaction, and that is important in itself, to show them that they are not alone in this and standing up to the United States. The second one, the second message, is to show the United States that the Europeans are united when it comes to this matter, and the fact that it's a mix of France, Germany, some Nordic countries, the UK, all of that also shows that unity. But most importantly, and it's along the lines of what I was talking about as a message coming from U.S. lawmakers, it's to sort of show Donald Trump that his idea and his rhetoric that the U.S. absolutely needs to take control of Greenland in order to protect its national security interest doesn't really fit the reality, and that NATO members together, if they surge those troops in Greenland, can protect their own national security and the U.S.'s national security together when you look at threats from Russia or China. Now, the White House, through its press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, yesterday said that Europe sending troops would have no impact on how Donald Trump thinks about taking over Greenland. But if you think about it, having actual NATO member state troops in Greenland, what does that do? Does the U.S. actually go there and send troops? Are you going to have NATO member state troops versus NATO member state troops? That makes it even maybe more unlikely for the U.S. to use force to take over Greenland. That doesn't mean that they're going to stop there, that Donald Trump is going to stop there. He might be continuing the pressure to sort of have a deal and maybe have Greenland do something as a deal there. That is what probably his envoy to Greenland is going to try to do when he goes to Greenland in March.
All right, thank you very much, Kethevane Gorjestani. We will see then as well what comes out of that American delegation to Copenhagen